At first, life with Simi felt like a breath of fresh air. She brought new energy into the house, always talking, always laughing, always suggesting something new to try. The silence that used to hang over the living room was replaced with the hum of loud music, reality shows, and voice notes from her friends. Mr. Ayo felt alive again. No school run schedules, no quiet dinners, no we need to talk moments. They went out more often, visiting new restaurants, beachside lounges, and weekend getaways. Simi always wanted pictures for every meal, for every outing, every new dress. She loved uploading videos of them together, dancing, laughing, and playfully bickering. She tagged him with hashtags like my king, and her followers adored the display. People commented, envied, and admired them both. For a moment, Mr. Ayo convinced himself he had made the right choice. But slowly, the excitement began to wear off. It started with the food. Simi never cooked, not at all. She constantly ordered food, usually very expensive meals from Instagram vendors. And whenever the food arrived, she would take pictures and post them online with captions like, my babe is always spoiling me. But the truth was, it wasn't anything special, just takeaway, paid for with his card like everything else. The meals weren't even satisfying because of the tiny portions. Half the time, he was left hungry, wondering when he last ate proper home cooked food. Betty would have cooked something warm and thoughtful, something that reminded him of home, he thought to himself. Simi also had no interest in house chores. Her makeup products were scattered all over the bedroom dresser. Her wigs hung like ghosts on the bathroom door, clothes piled on chairs, plates left in the sink for days. Whenever Mr. Ayo confronted Simi about it, she always blamed it on her being so busy, although he was never sure what she was always busy with. She spent his money extravagantly. She wanted the latest phone gadgets, even though her current ones were barely 6 months old. She wanted wigs that cost more than his children's school fees combined. She wanted to go on trips to different vacation destinations every month. Her expenses were never ending. And anytime he raised an eyebrow or hesitated, she would pout and say things like, you didn't complain when you were buying things for your ex wife. Why is it now a problem? The comparisons started coming more often. You're always so serious. No wonder your wife looked tired all the time. You're so stingy sometimes. Maybe that's why she left you. Abeg, don't turn this place into a prison like your former home. The passive comments weren't playful anymore from Mr. Ayo. They stung. Their intimate moments, which was once fairy and constant, also cooled down a lot. She stopped initiating, and when he reached out for her, she often sighed and muttered that she was tired. When he asked what was wrong, she would roll her eyes and hiss at him. Where Betty would sit with him in quiet moments, simply enjoying the silence together. Simi always had her phone in hand, laughing at gossip, switching from one influencer's drama to the other. She had no patience for deep talk, no interest in his long days. If he ever came home looking worried, her reaction was usually, you started again, oh please, I can't deal with mood swings right now. He started staying late at work, not because of the workload, but because he didn't want to go home. He missed his children. He missed the quiet warmth of Betsy's presence. He missed having someone who understood when to talk and when to just sit beside him and let him breathe. The children rarely visited. When they did, they were polite but stiff. Bolu, his youngest child, always asked, can I go back to mommy's house now? because they weren't comfortable around Simi. She didn't hide her impatience with them and treated their visits like an interruption to her schedule. One day, Betty called. It was the first time they spoke properly since the divorce. She sounded calm. I'm not trying to start anything, she said, but Bolu cried last night. She said you hardly call. Please check on them more often. He promised he would, but when he dropped the call, guilt crushed him. What kind of man forgets to call his own children? What kind of man lets go of someone like Betty? Those were the thoughts going through his mind. Few months later, Mr. Ayo's birthday came. Simi threw him a party with fancy decorations, champagne, loud music, and a bunch of influencers recording content for their pages. She wore a tiny dress and danced for the camera more than she danced with him. He smiled, posed, played along, but deep inside he felt like a prop. Betty sent a simple text that day. Happy birthday, Ayo. Hope you're well. He stared at the message for a long time and then typed, Thank you. He wanted to say more, but what else could he say? That night, after everyone had left and the house was filled with balloons and leftover cake and drinks, he sat on the couch and stared at the ceiling. Simi was already snoring inside one of the rooms. The silence felt heavy again, not the peaceful kind, the lonely kind. He turned his face to the wall and whispered into the dark, I made a very big mistake. Few weeks later, after the huge birthday party, one Wednesday evening, Mr. Ayo had just come back from work, exhausted and already annoyed because Simi hadn't picked his calls all afternoon. He heard a knock on the door. When he opened the door, he found a man in a black suit holding a brown envelope. Good evening, sir. Court summons. Please sign here. He blinked and asked, For what? The man didn't explain. He just handed him the papers and left. When he opened the envelope, his heart dropped. Betty had filed for full custody of the children. She had been civil after the divorce, allowing weekend visits, encouraging communication, but now she wanted the court to make it official. Her lawyer's letter explained that the environment around Mr. Ayo was unstable and emotionally unsafe for the children. She cited his partner's behavior, emotional neglect, and irregular contact with the kids. It felt like a slap. He thought of Bolu's small face, how she hugged him so tightly the last time she visited. He had promised to come for her school play and forgot. Betty did not remind him. She had stopped reminding him of everything. He went into the bedroom, found Simi on the bed scrolling through her phone. They are taking me to court for custody, he said to her. She looked up, confused. Who? My ex-wife, Betty, he replied. Simi shrugged. Well, what do you expect? You barely even call your kids. Maybe she's tired. Her words stung more than she knew. No support, no sympathy, just indifference. That night, he sat outside in the balcony and cried for the first time in years. Silent, heavy tears, not just for the custody battle, but for everything, his marriage, his family, his peace, and things only got worse. Simi changed drastically. Once she moved in fully, her attitude shifted. She no longer cared about keeping up appearances. Her jokes turned into sharp criticisms. She mocked his job, his salary, his routine. You act like a big man, but your bank account is always dry, she snapped one day during an argument. He had refused to fund a weekend trip to Abuja with her friends. He told her he had bills to pay for his kids. She told him to hustle better and he can do better as a man. The respect between them was gone. So was the intimacy. Some nights she would come home very late, smelling of masculine perfume, and her explanations became vague. He began to suspect what he once did to Betty was now happening to him. Mr. Ayo once tried checking Simi's phone while she was in the bathroom, but he realized that it was locked. She had changed her password. When he confronted her, she said sharply, I don't owe you anything, no. We're not even married. I'm not like your wife, oh. That sentence broke him. Not married? After everything he gave up to be with her? Soon after that, his health began to deteriorate. He had constant headaches, he slept poorly, and started skipping meals. His work performance dropped drastically. He was late often and was always absent minded. His boss pulled him aside one day and said to him, Mr. Ayo, you need to get your life together. You're not yourself anymore. But he already knew that. At home, he couldn't stand Simi anymore. The sound of her voice irritated him. Her laugh, which was once charming, now grated his nerves. He avoided her. Sometimes he slept on the couch just to find peace. One afternoon, he received a call from his children's school. Bolu had been hospitalized. He was down with high fever, and Betty was already there. He rushed to the hospital like a madman. When he arrived, he saw Betty sitting beside the hospital bed. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were tired. She didn't look at him. He sat down quietly. He wanted to say something, anything, but he was lost for words. Betty finally spoke without turning. She kept asking if we were coming. She blurted out. I'm sorry, he whispered. Betty stood up and left the room. They didn't speak again that day. But later that night, he stood outside the hospital building, staring at the dark sky, and realized something. He had everything he needed, he just didn't recognize it. Mr. Ayo didn't return home that night. He slept on a hospital bench outside Bolu's ward. His neck ached, his back was sore, and the night air was cold. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't care. He just wanted to be near his child. When the doctor discharged Bolu 2 days later, Betty took her home. Mr. Ayo offered to help with the bags, to ride along, maybe even stay a while, but Betty shook her head. She needs rest, she said, her voice polite but firm. We'll be fine. The message was clear. He watched them walk away, mother and daughter, hand in hand, and he stood there, outside the hospital doors, feeling like an outsider to his own family. He got back to his house around 9:30 that morning. As he unlocked the door and stepped in, a strange feeling washed over him, familiar but not in a good way. The air inside was stale, warm, heavy with a mix of burnt stew, body spray, and the scent of hair cream. There was loud music playing from somewhere in the apartment, and a trail of brightly colored clothes stretched from the living room into the hallway. One of Simi's wigs sat on the center table like a forgotten doll. Her high heels were tossed carelessly in opposite corners of the room. The house looked like it had hosted a party he wasn't invited to. He walked further in, almost afraid of what he might find. He knew he didn't need proof. The disrespect, the silence, the way she had been coming and going like a tenant. He had seen this play out before. He had once played the same role in another woman's story. That night, he asked her calmly, Is there someone else? She didn't look up from her phone. Does it matter? She replied. The next morning, Simi left. No apologies, no tears, no attempts to fix anything. She packed all her belongings and left. And just like that, Mr. Ayo was alone again. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It wasn't freedom. It was a thick, empty silence that stretched across the house and wrapped itself around his chest. The kind of silence that whispered constantly, "You did this to yourself." His children rarely called. Betty no longer picked his calls. The few friends who used to call had stopped trying. He had become the kind of man people spoke about in hushed tones and shook their heads over. He started going for therapy, not because he believed in it, but because he didn't know what else to do. He talked about Betty, about Simi, about the years he threw away chasing a version of happiness that didn't even exist. And for the first time, he admitted the truth out loud. "I destroyed the only home I ever had." One Sunday, he sat on his couch in the dark, holding the phone in his hand. No music, no shows, just silence. Sometimes, regret doesn't show up in dramatic ways. Sometimes, it sits with you in an empty house, with the sound of your own heartbeat reminding you of everything you lost.